The fountain pen slipped from Danielle Parker's hand just as the $200 million contract was placed on the table, not to be signed, but to be cancelled. In that instant, the glass-walled room seemed to lose its air, and the powerful faces across from her collapsed from confidence to panic. None of them knew that only hours earlier they had dismissed the woman, now standing before them, a woman they assumed was just another unqualified first-class passenger. But this story didn't begin with power. It began with the quiet endurance of someone who had spent her whole life being underestimated. That morning, the sun had barely risen over the Manhattan skyline, coating the transparent glass of Nova Shield Tower with gold. The 58-story headquarters, often called the technological fortress of the new era, shimmered in the early light. On the top floor, where the windows still held the last breath of night, Danielle Parker stood motionless before the city, her frame slender, but steel strong beneath a sharp navy suit. At 43 years old, she was one of the rare black CEOs wielding absolute authority in the cybersecurity world. Nova Shield Systems, valued at $12 billion, wasn't luck. It was built on sleepless nights, rejections fueled by bias, and hundreds of moments where someone had asked her, "Who are you assisting?" Every one of those questions had been answered by her undeniable rise. On her desk, a tablet glowed with new quarterly revenue projections, numbers shifting like cold lines of code. But each line was proof that she had bent centuries of prejudice to her will. The office door opened softly. Evan Miller, 29. Her most trusted assistant entered with a chocolate-brown leather case clutched to his chest. "Your San Francisco schedule is finalized," Evan said, placing the documents before her with the certainty of someone who had survived countless deadline storms at her side. And the airline confirmed Seat 2A first class. Danielle lifted her gaze. Something flickered in her eyes, not excitement, but that familiar alertness. Every successful black professional knows well the knowledge that achievement alone never guarantees respect. "The ticket is paid for?" she asked. "Yes." And they sent congratulations for Nova Shield's upcoming $200 million deal with Sterling Horizon Airlines. Evan added his voice, lowering as the number passed between them. Danielle's lips curved into a thin blade of a smile. "Sterling Horizon needs us more than we need them. They know that." She turned back to the city, but her mind wandered to a different skyline. The red brick neighborhoods of Atlanta, where a young Danielle had run between buildings, clutching dreams of escaping poverty through math, and the code no one believed she could write. When the clock struck 7:30, Danielle stepped out of the elevator, as if she and the building were made of the same foundation. Employees instinctively moved aside, not out of fear, but because something in her presence commanded space. A power that needed no introduction. Yet deep down she knew the truth, no matter how large her empire grew, if she walked into the wrong place in simple clothes, especially somewhere people believed they knew exactly what a first-class passenger should look like. She would always start from zero. Evan walked beside her. "I reconfirmed the car for tomorrow. 4 a.m. You'll land in San Francisco before 10 and have plenty of time before the 3 o'clock signing." Danielle nodded. "That contract will change aviation, and not because they're buying our technology," she said quietly. "It's because for the first time, an aircraft security system will be led by artificial intelligence that doesn't discriminate against any passenger." Evan looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "Do you think they're ready?" The question cut straight into the doubts Danielle kept buried. Ready or not? She replied, "Our job is to pull them into the future." 11:10 that morning, sunlight streamed through the glass panels of the conference room in a soft blue hue. The meeting with Nova Shield's technical team continued, but Danielle's thoughts were already drifting toward tomorrow. The $200 million deal, the largest system upgrade in Sterling Horizon's history, would place Nova Shield at the core of every one of their flights, from data protection and cockpit intrusion prevention to ground operation optimization through artificial intelligence. It was a key to a new era, but also a test for her. Danielle knew business didn't run on fairness. It ran on perception, and sometimes all it took was a different outfit for people to decide how they would treat you. The door opened again. Evan leaned in softly. They sent the list of attendees for the signing ceremony. The entire Sterling Horizon board will be there. Danielle raised an eyebrow. All of them. Yes, including CEO Gregory Stanton. A brief silence followed. Stanton, known for his traditional views and polished old-world leadership style, had never hidden what he believed corporate culture should look like. Danielle rose, picking up her 3-year-old Patek, watched the only luxury gift she had ever allowed herself after Nova Shield's first major victory. The steel blue face reflected her resolve. "Evan," she said, "prepare everything. Tomorrow is a milestone." "Yes, of course." Danielle turned to leave, but a thin thread of instinct tugged at her mind. Cold and weightless like wind slipping across her palm. In this world, the biggest catastrophes often began with the smallest things, a glance, a question, a tone. And she had no idea that in just a few hours when she stepped onto flight, CES H318, Sterling Horizon's world would collide with hers in a way no one could have predicted. Prejudice would collide with power. Misjudgment would slam into truth. And a flight attendant, convinced she was simply following proper procedure, was about to trigger the greatest reckoning in the airline's history. Danielle breathed in, tightening her grip on her bag strap. Tomorrow everything would begin in the sky, and none of them would have the slightest idea who they were about to face. The New York sky still held the last breath of night when the black SUV rolled into the VIP section of JFK Airport. Danielle's Patek watch had just struck 4:28 in the morning, yet her heartbeat was steady, as if the long day ahead were nothing more than a small exam. These were always her sharpest hours, the hours when the city drifted between sleep and awakening, and she stood ready to step into the future. No one could have imagined that in less than 2 hours this very place would become the starting point of a chain of discrimination severe enough to push an entire airline corporation to the edge of collapse. The driver opened the door. Danielle stepped out. The warm yellow glow from the Terminal 4 sign washed over her ash-gray cashmere coat, softening her features without diminishing the force of her presence. Her Rimowa carry-on glided behind her wheels, whispering against the polished floor like the countdown to an invisible battle. She never dressed to flaunt. She never needed to. To Danielle, true power didn't live in clothes. It lived in the way people could not ignore you, even when they tried. And yet, there would always be places, always be people who would try to ignore her on purpose. Today they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. Inside the business class area, an unexpected silence lingered. A check-in agent with neatly tied hair and a navy blazer looked up as Danielle approached. The woman's face shifted from neutral to courteously alert in a single blink. "Good morning, Miss Parker. We are very pleased to assist you today." Sterling Horizon Flight SH318 is still on time for departure. Danielle gave a soft smile. She handed over her ID. The agent scanned it once. No second checks, no extra questions. Any checked luggage, ma'am, no. Just this one. Perfect. Your seat 2A is ready for you. Danielle accepted the boarding pass. Everything smooth, everything professional. Yet within that small window of calm, an uneasy thread wound its way into her mind. Years of experience had taught her one thing: perfect peace. At the start of a journey often meant a storm was waiting at the end of it. She moved through the priority security lane. A TSA officer glanced at her boarding pass and immediately smiled. "I follow Nova Shield on LinkedIn. Your new AI network is incredible." "Thank you," Danielle replied, warm yet composed. She continued onward, leaving behind the small talk to enter the first-class lounge. The room glowed with soft amber light. Leather seats, wide glass windows overlooking a runway beginning to brighten. Danielle sat, opened her laptop, and reviewed the presentation she would deliver that afternoon. And in that luxurious quiet, the sensation returned sharp as a cold blade laid along her spine, the instinct of someone who had been underestimated hundreds of times. Something was coming. She didn't know from where, she didn't know who, but it was moving toward her. 6:02 in the morning, the announcement chimed through the lounge. Sterling Horizon Flight SH318 to San Francisco is now boarding. Danielle closed her laptop, slipped on her coat, and rose. She didn't rush, but every step grew slightly heavier, as if the air around her were shifting. At the gate, about 10 passengers were already lined up. Most were white men, in pale grey or navy business suits, the type who flew frequently enough to consider first class their natural habitat. A few glanced at Danielle. Not hostile, just assessing. And assessments like that always carried an unspoken assumption: she wasn't one of them. Danielle stood behind a man in his 60s, slightly heavy-set, wearing a green golf jacket. He didn't look at her only, shifted subtly to the side, with the quiet entitlement of someone certain he belonged here, and equally certain she might not. A female flight attendant waited at the front of the line, Heather Collins, 29 scanning boarding passes, with a smile that only lifted on one side. And then it happened. She glanced at Danielle. Her eyes lingered a fraction too long. Then Heather stepped forward, raising a hand to pause the line, as though she had detected an error. "I'm sorry," she said, her smile thinning. "This lane is for first-class passengers and priority members." Her voice spread across the boarding area like a stage cue, loud enough for everyone to turn and look. Danielle remained perfectly calm. "Yes, I am in first class." Heather tilted her head, doubt sharpening her features. "Are you sure this is boarding lane number 1, seat 2? Danielle said, offering her boarding pass. "You can scan it." But Heather didn't scan. She looked for a second, then a third, far longer than it took to read a card. "Could I see your identification?" Heather asked, lowering her voice but projecting enough for others to hear. Danielle stood still. In her mind, a heavy metallic clang echoed the sound of disrespect wrapped in the disguise of procedure. Not one passenger before her had been asked for ID. Not one had been stopped, as though they needed to prove they belonged. Danielle handed over her ID without a word, but in her eyes, a cold steadiness began to rise. A gate agent, Sophie Barnes, around 33, saw the tension and stepped closer. She instantly sensed what was happening, not because she noticed a difference, but because the difference was too familiar, in service industries. Is there a problem? Heather still stared at the boarding pass, as if it were suspicious. Just verifying. I thought this passenger might be in the wrong line. A chill slid down Danielle's spine, but she kept it locked away. Sophie needed only half a second to understand. "No issue at all," Sophie said quickly. "Miss Parker is checked in. Please proceed." It was the correct explanation, but not the true one. The truth was simple. Heather saw a black woman in the first-class line and assumed there was a mistake. Heather reluctantly stepped back and returned the ID. As she lowered her head, Danielle caught the faintest mutter. "Protocol still has to be followed." Danielle walked past her without turning her heartbeat, slowing into heavy, deliberate thuds. Not because she felt insulted, but because her instincts, sharp as a surgeon's blade, whispered one thing. This was only the beginning. The storm had not yet started to blow. But it was coming, and when it finally touched her, an entire airline would tremble. The air inside Sterling Horizon's first-class cabin that morning was cool enough to feel almost emotionless. White light from the overhead panels poured onto the cream leather seats, polished to the point where they reflected even the faintest flicker of emotion people tried to hide. Danielle stepped in and pulled her suitcase towards seat 2. Moving with the ease of someone long accustomed to this level of luxury, yet never lulled into complacency by it. She had lived long enough to understand a simple truth: the more expensive the space, the deeper the prejudice. She set her laptop in the seat pocket, removed her cashmere coat with fluid movements, but her eyes stayed sharp, thin as a blade. The men seated around her, white shirts, grey suits, gleaming metal watches, cast quick glances her way, glances that diagnosed her like an anomaly. They did not speak, but their eyes spoke for them. Not a regular first-class traveller. Not one of us. Not fitting the template. Danielle was so used to this that sometimes she thought she had grown less sensitive to it. But this silence was not normal. It was not the polite kind. It was the silence of judgment. At that moment, Tyler James, a flight attendant in his early 30s, brown hair, smile, practiced to perfection, entered the cabin with the beverage cart. He started at the first row. Seat 1, a wide smile. Seat 1B, warm small talk. Seat 1C, a respectful bow. Then he reached seat 2B beside Danielle and leaned in politely. "What would you like to drink, sir?" After serving 2B, he pushed the cart forward to row 3, as if seat 2A were empty, as if the woman who had been sitting there the entire time were simply part of the cabin decor. Danielle lifted her eyes. She said nothing. She asked nothing, but the cold sharpness in her gaze made the air shift just slightly. When Tyler finally finished the row, Danielle spoke in a tone so soft it could have passed for harmless. "Excuse me, I haven't been offered a beverage." Tyler stopped, startled for a moment, or pretending to be no one could tell. "Oh, I thought you—" He swallowed the rest of the sentence. "What would you like, sparkling water?" "No ice with lemon." Tyler nodded, but only a second later answered with a tone that had stiffened. "We are out of sparkling water." Danielle glanced toward the front of the cabin. On the counter were 3 green Pellegrino bottles Tyler had just poured for seats 1A through 1C. She understood immediately. "Out," she repeated. Her voice did not rise, did not fall, but cut through his excuse like a scalpel. "Or out for me?" Tyler squinted slightly, offering a thin smile the kind service workers use when they want to end a conversation without technically breaking protocol. "I can bring you some water." Bring it, Danielle replied, and bring it properly. As Tyler walked away, a man in his 50s, seated diagonally behind her salt and pepper hair, the build of someone in tech, leaned slightly toward her. "I've never seen service like this in first class," he whispered, quiet enough not to draw attention. Danielle turned to him. His eyes held no pity, only the sharp observation of someone who knew injustice when he saw it. "My name is Orrin Blake," he murmured. "I write for Business Ledger. Nova Shield." "Correct. I've read a lot about your company's technology." Danielle shook his hand, and this time her smile was genuine. "Thank you for noticing. Not everyone pays enough attention to notice," Aaron said softly. "Especially in this space." His words carried more weight than any apology. Tyler returned, placing a glass of plain water in front of her. No lemon, no courtesy. Danielle studied the glass for several seconds, as if committing the moment to memory. Not because the mistake mattered, but because it represented something much larger. She opened her laptop, attempting to focus on her presentation, but a single line of thought kept repeating. This is not the moment to lose control. Not the moment for an impulsive reaction. Not the moment to sacrifice the composure the entire tech industry respected her for. But then the cabin threw another spark into the fire she was trying to smother. After the plane reached cruising altitude, the familiar ding sounded. Tyler began the snack service. Once again, 2A was skipped as if invisible. Danielle pressed the call button. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. No one appeared. She pressed it again. This time, a woman in her early 50s approached, tall blonde hair, neatly rolled her name tag reading, "Linda Harper, Senior Flight Attendant." "What did you need?" Linda asked, her expression molded into a forced, rigid friendliness. "I was skipped during service." Linda flicked her eyes toward Tyler, not with curiosity or concern, but with a glance that treated Danielle as an inconvenience mid-flight. "I'll inform him." 5 minutes passed. No one came. Danielle pressed the button a third time. This time, Tyler returned annoyance, etched clearly across his face. "What do you want?" "I want to be served like everyone else." Tyler exhaled, as if this simple request exhausted him. "What do you want, a cheese plate and a glass of Cabernet?" He turned without a word. When he returned, he set the tray down so hard, the food nearly slid off the plate. No apology, no eye contact, not even basic courtesy. Danielle set her fork down. A cold current shot through her, precise and alarming. Who do they think I am? Where do they think I belong? And how would they act if I weren't a CEO at all? As the question surfaced, the answer arrived. Linda returned her voice sharper, deliberately loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I noticed you seem uncomfortable in your seat. If you'd like, we have an extra seat in economy. It might suit you better." The air erupted in silent shock. Passengers turned. A few smirks appeared. Aaron's jaw dropped. Danielle looked straight at Linda. "Which seat?" she asked quietly. "Do you think suits me better?" Linda blinked, not expecting the question to strike so cleanly. "We're just trying to accommodate a frequent flyer," she said, avoiding Danielle's gaze. "He usually sits here." Danielle didn't need to ask who. The silver-haired man from boarding, the one who acted as if seat 2A were his inherited property, was watching her with impatient entitlement, as if waiting for her to move. The storm had begun, and it was headed straight for Danielle. She sat upright. "No," she said softly. "I will not move, and I want to know the real reason behind your suggestion." Linda faltered for a single second, Then her hesitation evaporated, replaced by the cold confidence of someone who believed they had power. "If you continue to make this difficult," Linda warned, "I will call the captain." Danielle's lips curved into a thin, sharp smile, a warning Linda could not read. "Go ahead." If Linda had known who she was speaking to, she would never have said those words. But she didn't know, and because she didn't know, this storm would not only tear through first class, it would tear through Sterling Horizon itself. The first-class cabin fell into a thick, suffocating silence as Linda turned and walked away, her heels striking the carpet with the heavy rhythm of fate knocking at the door. Danielle sat perfectly still, her hand resting on the table, her palm cold, yet her breathing unnervingly steady, the steadiness of someone who had been tested far too many times to be shaken now. She was not angry. She was not trembling. The only thing rising inside her was the razor clarity of instinct she had known this moment would come. She had known it was only a matter of time, but she didn't know just how bad it was about to get. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Then came the sound, the thudding footsteps growing louder, pounding like storm waves against the hull of a ship. A man emerged from the cockpit. Captain Raymond Holt, 54 years old, tall and broad, his uniform crisp, his jaw set, carrying the expression of someone convinced he held absolute authority in this sealed metal world. His stern gaze drilled into Danielle like a steel bit. "Ma'am," he began, his voice rough and commanding, "I've been informed that you are causing a disturbance." Linda stood behind him, hands folded across her stomach, triumph glowing in her eyes, as if she had finally found proof to punish the woman who didn't know her place. Danielle looked straight at the captain. No flinch, no blink. A disturbance, she repeated, her voice soft, but weighted enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. "The crew reports," Captain Holt continued, "that you are uncooperative, refusing to follow instructions from the flight attendants, and creating a situation that affects the experience of other passengers." A few men in first class nodded reflexively, the conditioned response to authority. Others watched Danielle with curiosity, waiting to see if she would calm down like so many passengers who had been summoned by the uniform. But Danielle did not bow. She unlocked her phone. The screen was still lit, the audio recording still running. Linda's voice, sweet on the surface, but dripping with bias, played clearly. "There's an economy seat that might suit you better. A frequent flyer needs this seat. If you continue to be difficult, I will call the captain." She placed the phone on the table. The entire cabin held its breath. Danielle spoke, each word sharp and slow like a blade, slicing through layers of pretense. "If you intend to make a decision based on the crew's statements, then you need to hear the evidence." Captain Holt's expression hardened. "Recording devices are prohibited under Sterling Horizon policy." He replied, his tone even more severe. Danielle lifted her chin, her voice turning cold enough to alter the air around them. "Racial discrimination on a commercial flight is a violation of federal law in the United States." The cabin felt vacuum, sealed, every molecule of air pulled tight. A subtle shift rippled through the seats. Aaron Blake, the tech journalist, chose that moment to step into the confrontation. He leaned forward, instinct guiding him into the role of witness. "I saw everything Aaron said clearly. She was skipped during service. Twice she pressed the call button with no response. Then she was asked to move to economy so an older white passenger could take her seat." He fixed his eyes on the captain with the precision of someone who had dismantled hundreds of false narratives in print. That is discrimination, not disturbance. Linda jerked back her face, draining of color. She had not expected a witness, much less a journalist. But Captain Holt clung to his fading sense of authority. "Sir, we will review your information." But the situation, Danielle cut him off. "Do you know my name, Captain?" He frowned, thrown off by the question. I am Danielle Parker, CEO of Nova Shield Systems." The small 12-seat cabin transformed into a silent auditorium. A passenger dropped a pen. Tyler froze like a statue. Linda's mouth fell open, but no sound emerged. Danielle continued each word, striking like a hammer. "My company is the provider of the cybersecurity system. Sterling Horizon is scheduled to finalize in a $200 million agreement this afternoon." Lightning cracked through the cabin. Someone behind her exhaled, "My God." Aaron leaned back, watching the faces shift pale, knowing he was witnessing the opening scene of a career-defining article. Captain Holt stepped back half a pace. The armor of his confidence shattered instantly. Miss Parker," he stammered, voice cracking. I apologize. There must have been a misunderstanding, no," Danielle replied. "Not a misunderstanding. A pattern?" She lifted her phone, stopped the recording, then met his eyes with a force that smothered every excuse. "If I hadn't said my name, what would you have done? Forced me out of my seat, sent me to economy, had the police waiting at the gate when we landed." Captain Holt faltered his lips, trembling. We didn't intend." "Exactly," Danielle said slowly. "Intention is irrelevant when bias does the job for you." Linda lowered her head, but Danielle refused to let her hide. "And you, Linda?" Danielle said, her gaze pinning the senior attendant in place. "Were you planning to ask the white passenger in row 1 to move to economy?" Linda said nothing. She couldn't. Captain Holt tried to reclaim control. "We will ensure the remainder of the flight proceeds smoothly." Danielle watched him for a long moment. "I hope so," she said, "because from this moment on, every action Sterling Horizon takes will be reviewed carefully, not only by a passenger, but by a potential business partner." Aaron inhaled sharply, murmuring, "Oh God, they're finished." As Captain Holt retreated, Tyler practically sprinted to Danielle's seat, trembling like a scolded puppy. "Miss Parker, may I bring you sparkling water?" Danielle did not look at him. "Oh, so it does exist," Tyler swallowed hard. "Why, yes, it does. Then bring it." Her voice was flat as a dead, calm lake before a storm. As Tyler rushed away, Aaron leaned closer, whispering, "I'm going to write about this, if you'll allow it." Danielle didn't turn her head, her eyes fixed forward, as if seeing straight through the aircraft's metal frame. "Go ahead. But wait until I finish my meeting in San Francisco." She turned toward him, offering a small smile sharp as a blade. "Because the most interesting part hasn't even started." Ahead of her was a 3-hour stretch of sky, but behind her was an airline fracturing in real time, and Danielle knew this with absolute certainty. They had chosen the wrong person to cross, and the price they would pay would be measured in tens of millions of dollars, if not more. The Boeing Dreamliner sliced through a thick layer of clouds, leaving behind a thin, white trail like a cut across the sky. But inside the first-class cabin, the air felt sharper and colder than the 37,000 feet outside. After the explosive confrontation with the captain, everything suddenly became too quiet. Quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Quiet in a way that suggested the entire crew was shrinking into themselves, terrified that any wrong movement might ignite what was waiting to explode. Danielle sat upright, her hands interlaced on the table. Her eyes were fixed on her laptop screen, but her mind was analyzing every breath, every glance, every fracture of silence around her. Her calm was not peace. It was the center of a storm. Tyler returned, carrying sparkling water with a perfectly cut slice of lemon. This time, he bowed so low he nearly touched the seat. A strained smile, a trembling voice. His hand placed the glass on the table as if offering tribute. Do you need anything else?" Miss Parker Danielle did not look at him. "No." Tyler lingered 1 second too long, then backed away, nearly running. A younger man in the row behind inhaled sharply as Tyler rushed past. He whispered to his travel companion, "Lord, they messed with the wrong woman." In the next row, a woman in her 40s wearing a grey suit glanced at Danielle, then murmured to her husband, "She doesn't look like a CRO." Her husband replied softly, just loud enough for Danielle to hear, "That's their problem, not hers." The answer made Danielle tilt her head, slightly studying him for a moment. Not because he defended her, but because he understood the larger picture. This wasn't only about Danielle, it was a symptom of a system. And that system was about to be shaken. 30 minutes later, the cabin settled into cruise. No one spoke. Even the business travelers who usually bragged about morning deals fell silent, afraid that a single careless sentence might drag them into the heart of the storm. Danielle opened her email, reviewing the documents Evan had prepared for the afternoon meeting. The numbers appeared one after another. $200 million, 18 months of implementation, 62 domestic aircraft, 32 international ones. Every number represented a major step for aviation. Every number marked a milestone for Nova Shield. Every number was something Sterling Horizon was risking out of prejudice. Danielle narrowed her eyes. She thought of Linda. "A different seat may suit you better." She thought of Tyler. "We are out of sparkling water." She thought of Heather scrutinizing her ID as if she were trying to breach a restricted zone. Small pieces scattered, seemingly insignificant. But put together they formed a picture no one could deny. And that was when Danielle realized this was no longer an incident. This was an opportunity. An opportunity to do what she had always wanted, strike directly at a decaying system. As she sank deeper into her thoughts, Aaron Blake leaned slightly toward her, his voice low. "I'm taking notes. I don't want to miss anything. But I need to ask one thing. Do you actually want this to go public?" Danielle closed her laptop and turned gently toward him. "What do you think I think? If you don't speak up, no one will know. Sterling Horizon will deny it. The crew will stick together, and the report will call this a misunderstanding or a procedural error. I've seen it 1,000 times." Danielle smiled faintly, a smile tired yet sharp. "That's exactly why I can't stay silent." Aaron exhaled slowly, like a man who understood the burden journalists often carry, that some stories cannot be written quietly. "All right," he said. "I'll do it right. Thorough. Nothing omitted. But you give me the signal for when to publish. You'll have it," Danielle replied. A younger flight attendant, likely a trainee, approached Danielle's seat. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were sincere. "Miss Parker, I just want to apologize for everything that happened since boarding. I wasn't directly involved, but I know it was wrong." Danielle looked at her for a few seconds. No anger, no blame. "Thank you," she said softly. "What matters isn't the mistake. What matters is recognizing it." The girl nodded, and walked away, her eyes still glistening. Immediately Tyler appeared in the aisle, glaring sharply at the young attendant, as if warning her she had taken the wrong side. Danielle saw it. She remembered it. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers. "We will be landing in 50 minutes. His tone carried a faint tremble, hidden behind forced professionalism, but Danielle heard the tension, underneath the tension, of a man who knew his career was hanging mid-air. She closed her eyes, took a long breath, and in that breath she made her decision. A decision no longer about personal insult, a decision carrying the weight of change. As the plane began its descent, Aaron leaned in again. "I have to say this. If you choose to cancel the contract, I would understand. But if you choose to sign it, I'd understand that too." Danielle opened her eyes, looked at him. "Which one do you think I'll choose?" Aaron smiled faintly. "I think you won't choose either. I think you'll create a third option." Danielle smiled back, thin and knowing. "You understand me." Landing came smoothly. The wheels touched the runway with a soft thud, accompanied by a collective exhale from the cabin, but Danielle didn't join that small relief. She was already preparing for the real confrontation. As the plane rolled toward the gate, Linda approached, trying to resurrect the authority she had lost. "Miss Parker, on behalf of the crew, we apologize for the inconvenience. We always strive. You don't need to continue." Danielle cut in her voice, so gentle it made Linda flinch. "You will say that to your superiors, and at the press briefing this afternoon." Linda's eyes widened. She understood, and for the first time that flight, she felt fear. When the aircraft door opened, golden San Francisco morning light flooded inside, illuminating Danielle's face like she was stepping onto a stage. She rose, grabbed her suitcase, and nodded to Aaron. "See you in the article." Aaron smiled. "I think this one will change a lot." Danielle answered without turning around, "I know. Because I intend for it to change everything." She walked off the plane, her heels tapping steadily along the jet bridge, the measured steps of a woman about to turn a discriminatory incident into a $200 million earthquake for an entire airline. And that's just the beginning. San Francisco greeted Danielle with a thin layer of mist, soft as a velvet curtain draped over the city. But for her, the air did not ease. It tightened, grew heavier, as if the aftershocks of the confrontation in the sky had followed her all the way here. The hotel car from the Meridian Grand pulled up to the entrance. A young concierge hurried out to open the door, his smile bright and unknowing, unaware that the woman stepping onto the pavement had shaken an entire airline with only a handful of razor-sharp sentences. "Welcome, Miss Parker." He bowed. "Your executive suite is ready." Here everyone knew who she was, and that alone revealed something bitter buried deep inside her. Why is fairness only granted when the title of CEO is attached to her name? Why must the right social stand-in be the entry ticket to respect? The question burned low and steady, like embers in her chest. When the suite door closed behind her, Danielle set her leather bag onto the sofa and stood still. The space was expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the bay, pale wooden floors, everything arranged with immaculate luxury. But none of it brought her peace. Inside her chest it felt as if an invisible wire were being pulled tight, not from fear, but from a cold, controlled anger, sharp as the edge of metal. She inhaled deeply, held it long enough to push her emotions down, then released it slowly. Do not let emotion lead. Do not react, calculate. Her phone buzzed. Evan had texted, "Have you arrived safely?" The meeting documents are ready. Do you need anything? Danielle called him immediately. Her voice was steady, precise, the tone her team recognized as the moment when an inconvenience had escalated into a strategic issue. Evan, we have a new situation. Did something happen? Danielle recounted the entire flight from Heather at the boarding gate to Tyler skipping service to Linda, trying to force her into another seat, and finally the captain himself. She gave every detail, her tone smooth and cold like a running algorithm. On the other end, Evan fell silent when she mentioned the recording. Oh, God. He exhaled, but Danielle cut him off. No emotions. Listen. Yes. I need you to do 3 things. 1, contact Summit Pacific Air and Continental Vista Airlines. Tell them that if they want a chance at an exclusive global cybersecurity partnership, this is the moment. I'll do it now, Evan replied, his voice sharpening. 2, prepare an internal report for the Nova Shield Executive Board. Emphasize that Sterling Horizon just experienced a top-tier service crisis, and that I am re-evaluating their suitability. I'll send it as soon as it's done. 3. Danielle paused, eyes drifting toward the large window, where sunlight turned the city gold. Collect every public document Sterling Horizon has ever released about diversity staffing training and customer service standards. I want to see what they promised on the surface and how they failed at the core. Understood. Danielle ended the call and set the phone down. Silence returned, but now it no longer pressed against her. It had become a strategic space, a place to think, a place to plan the counter-strike. She opened her laptop. An email was waiting, sent by Nina Rodriguez, her chief legal counsel. Danielle clicked it, open her expression sharpening with each line. From a legal standpoint, you have full grounds to classify this as discrimination. But this is not just a legal matter. We are standing at the edge of an opportunity for systemic change. Below that were 4 strategic options. 1, sign the contract as planned and handle the incident privately. 2, weak, solving nothing at the root. 2, use the contract as leverage to demand a full internal restructuring. Good, but it needed stronger conditions. 3, pause the contract and expose the incident publicly. High risk, but public sentiment would heavily favor Danielle. 4, withdraw entirely and move to a competitor, announcing the reason publicly to apply industry pressure. A decisive blow that would force the entire aviation sector to adjust. Danielle tilted her head. A thin smile formed sharp as a line of light. Not one of the 4. A new version that combined all of them into a single strike. She had not yet drafted her next step when her phone vibrated again, this time an email from Sterling Horizon. Subject line, apology for the inconvenience. Danielle opened it. Her eyes turned to glass. We regret you experienced some minor discomfort and misunderstanding during your flight. We are committed to improving our service quality. Please accept 3 complimentary first-class tickets as our apology. Danielle closed her eyes. How sad. They did not understand. Not at all. Their offense was not in the action itself. It was in believing the issue could be patched over with free tickets, as if what they damaged was service, not dignity. She deleted the email without hesitation. The phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. Danielle hesitated for a moment, then answered. Miss Parker. A warm, middle-aged male voice, tinged with tension. Who is this Aaron Blake, the journalist from first class? Danielle leaned back on the sofa, turning toward the window. Did you find something new? More than you think? Sterling Horizon has had at least 4 discrimination complaints in the past 2 years, all settled internally. No one knows. No one heard. Danielle's breath stayed steady. You want to publish it, don't you? Of course, but I want to hear from you first. I don't want the article to blow up your meeting today, unless that's what you want. She smiled not to the phone, but to the resolve inside herself. Wait for me, she said. You'll have an answer after the meeting. And when I have it, Aaron replied, Sterling Horizon will not look the same. That's the point. Danielle hung up. Silence again. Not the silence of confusion, not the silence of fear, the silence of strategy crystallizing. Danielle walked to the window, looking out at San Francisco's layered skyline, beautiful, cold, proud. A city like this, an industry like this, an airline like this, all believed they were too big to be shaken. She braced her hands on the window frame. All right, she whispered. They want a lesson, I'll teach one. She returned to the desk and opened a new file. At the top, she typed 3 words. The Parker Standards. Standards that would redefine how aviation understood fairness. Standards that would turn a terrible flight into a historic pivot point. Standards that would make Sterling Horizon realize that the price of prejudice was higher than any contract they could sign. And in that moment, Danielle was no longer the target of discrimination. She became the architect, reshaping the rules. And the next chapter, it would begin in a 42-floor boardroom, facing the woman they had underestimated from the very first glance. Sterling Horizon Airlines headquarters rose from the heart of San Francisco's financial district like a massive block of cold steel, sharp and imposing under the early afternoon sun. The glass of the 42nd floor reflected the entire sky, but Danielle knew what waited behind it was not a view, but one of the biggest confrontations of her career. She stepped out of the black sedan, her deep red power suit cutting through the concrete landscape like a shard of fire. The receptionist stared for a second, then another, as if struggling to believe that the black woman walking through the revolving door was the very CEO the entire company had been preparing to meet. But when Evan and 3 senior executives from Nova Shield followed behind her, the combined presence made the massive lobby itself seem to tighten. "Welcome, Ms. Parker," the receptionist said, voice trembling slightly. "The executive board is waiting on the 42nd floor." Danielle nodded. "Thank you. We won't keep anyone waiting." She didn't finish the sentence, but those who understood power heard the part she didn't say. They were the ones who should worry, not her. The high-speed elevator shot upward the enclosed space, quiet enough that every breath sounded like a preparation for battle. Evan glanced at her. "Are you sure you want to do this in the meeting?" "No," Danielle replied, eyes fixed on the steel doors. "I want them to understand they chose this." The elevator opened. The 42nd floor corridor was lined with thick carpet, soft lighting the faint scent of mahogany. A black and gold plaque read, "Executive Boardroom, Sterling Horizon." Evan opened the door for her. Every head turned the moment Danielle entered. Inside the long boardroom, a polished wooden table stretched like a giant mirror, reflecting the faces of the 12 highest-ranking leaders of the airline. 11 white men over the age of 45, 1 white woman around 50. And at the head of the table sat CEO Gregory Stanton, 60 years old, his silver hair combed meticulously, his bright white smile so perfect it felt artificial. In a brief moment, Danielle registered something important. Not one person in that room looked like her. And that was exactly the problem. Miss Parker Stanton stood and extended his hand. We've been very much looking forward to today's signing. Danielle shook his hand, with the precise balance of firmness and restraint, enough for him to feel that power in this room did not belong solely to him. "Thank you, Mr. Stanton," she said, her voice soft and steady as silk. "Today will be memorable." Stanton's smile wavered. The meeting began. They discussed the AI security system. They talked about deployment plans. They reviewed the communication strategy for after the contract was signed. Everything was smooth, clean, and professional, as if Flight SH-318 had never existed. Danielle said nothing. She let them talk. She let them breathe easily, before she pulled the ground out from beneath them. When the CFO finished the final slide, Stanton turned to her. "So, do you have any final input before we sign?" Danielle closed her laptop. The small click rang through the room like a trigger. "I'd like to share my experience with Sterling Horizon yesterday." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Eyes darted across the table. Stanton forced a smile. "Oh, I hope your flight was pleasant." "No," Danielle replied. It was not. She recounted everything. Heather blocking her at the gate, Tyler skipping her during service, Linda trying to force her to change seats, the captain accusing her of being disruptive, the condescending remarks, the prejudiced glances, every piece of a deeper, uglier pattern. No emotion, no anger. Just facts, precise and irrefutable. When she finished, the room fell into a vacuum of silence. Stanton opened his mouth first, but his voice trembled. "Miss Parker, I'm deeply sorry. Do you know what I found interesting?" Danielle cut in gently, as if discussing the weather. "I found 7 similar complaints in the past 18 months, all involving black passengers, all handled internally. None corrected. Stanton froze. The entire board jolted. None of them knew she had discovered that. Danielle placed both hands on the table and leaned forward, her gaze slicing through each face like a blade. "Nova Shield does not partner with organizations that treat people like me with contempt, or treat passengers without power as disposable." One of the senior executives sputtered, "Tish, that was just an employee error." "We can retrain." Danielle narrowed her eyes. Her voice dropped to a chilling precision. "This is not an employee problem. It is a culture problem." The sentence struck the room like a verdict. Then Stanton, desperate to salvage the contract, blurted out, "If you're concerned about the partnership, we're willing to increase the contract value to $250 million. Danielle laughed. Not with amusement, but with the sound of someone watching a man destroy himself without knowing it. "You think my dignity is worth $50 million? Stanton's face drained of color. And Danielle delivered the sentence that shattered the room completely. "My dignity is not for sale. At any price." Evan glanced at her pride, unmistakable in his eyes. Another board member spoke up, voice shaking. "Then, what do you want in order to continue this partnership?" Danielle straightened her voice, as solid as reinforced concrete. "I want Sterling Horizon to overhaul its corporate culture. I want mandatory anti-bias training for all levels. I want full transparency on customer complaints. I want real accountability." Then she placed a document on the table. The cover displayed 3 bold words, the Parker Standards. No one moved. No one breathed. Danielle delivered the final blow. "Mr. Stanton, Sterling Horizon has 24 hours to decide. Either implement these structural changes, or lose Nova Shield and let Summit Pacific Air take your place." Without another word, she turned and walked out, never looking back. Behind her, the room erupted into chaos, whispering, gasping, pale faces. But Danielle. She stepped into the elevator like a performer exiting the stage after the greatest performance of her career. Yet she knew one thing. The battle had only just begun. And the next 24 hours would determine whether an airline empire survived or collapsed. The elevator doors closed behind Danielle, and the entire 42nd floor erupted like a room suddenly robbed of oxygen. Chairs scraped breaths, sharpened fists hit the polished mahogany table. Everything detonated within seconds of her silhouette disappearing. Meanwhile, the elevator carried Danielle downward through a tunnel of cold silence, but inside her the silence was anything but still. It gathered in her chest, it spun into a storm, and it kept her sharper than ever. She had dropped a bomb in the center of Sterling Horizon's power structure. Now she was waiting for the shockwave to ripple across the entire aviation industry. When she stepped into the grand lobby, Evan rushed toward her from the seating area. "Are you all right? I'm fine," Danielle replied, though her eyes were sharp enough for Evan to know that fine was nowhere near the full truth. Someone like Danielle didn't get shaken by a meeting. She used it as ignition. "Let's go," she said. "The clock starts now." The moment she entered the car, Danielle's phone began vibrating non-stop. Not one alert, not two, dozens layered on top of each other. Evan glanced at her screen, his eyes widening. "You need to see this." Danielle swiped open the notifications. A news article had just gone live. The headline was bold, clear, explosive. Black Tech CEO faces discrimination on Sterling Horizon. Flight $200 million deal at risk. It was Aaron Blake's article. Below it, the first wave of comments, Sterling Horizon again. "How is this still happening in 2025? I hope she cancels that deal. Her name is Danielle Parker, CEO of Nova Shield. Oh, this is big." The comment list grew longer every second. Evan stared at her, stunned. "You told him to wait?" Danielle smirked. "He didn't publish anything about the meeting. This is only about the flight." And this little spark, she tapped the screen lightly, is going to ignite the rest. Her phone rang again. This time it was Nina. Danielle answered on speaker. "Nina, I assume you've seen it." "I have." Nina replied, her voice calm and serious. "And I'm assuming part 2 is that you dropped the full Parker Standards draft on their table." Danielle smiled. "Not the draft, the final version." Nina let out a half laugh, half sigh. "You might be the only person alive who can turn a terrible flight into an industry-wide strategic strike." The car turned onto Market Street when a new wave of notifications lit up Danielle's phone. Evan glanced down. Oh no. Sterling Horizon just released a press statement. Danielle opened it immediately. Sterling Horizon Airlines regrets the inconvenience experienced by passenger Danielle Parker. She continued reading. Then a quiet, razor-edged laugh slipped out. "Inconvenience," Danielle repeated, lowering the phone onto the seat. They turned discrimination into a service hiccup, a bargain bin PR move. Evan's brow tightened. "Do they think you'll stay quiet? They think I can be bought?" Danielle leaned her head back against the seat, her eyes drifting out the window. "But they just made the biggest mistake. They think I'm just a customer." Meanwhile, back at Sterling Horizon headquarters, the boardroom was chaos. The legal director shouted, "She has recorded evidence. We cannot deny anything." The PR director tried to stay composed. "We just need to control the narrative." Control, the CFO slammed his hand on the table. The stock is dropping for real. Someone check the entire room, lunged for their laptops. On every screen, Sterling Horizon, stock down 3.4%, down 3.9%, down 4.5%. Everyone saw it. No one dared speak. Stanton stood frozen at the head of the table. The panic in his eyes made it clear the confidence he displayed in front of Danielle had been nothing but a mask. "We need to call her Stanton," said voice trembling. "We need to fix this immediately." On the other side of the city, Danielle sat in her suite at the Meridian Grand laptop open phone beside her, her fingers moving with the precision of a conductor, orchestrating a media firestorm. The first email arrived from Summit Pacific Air. "We are monitoring the situation. If Nova Shield is open to exclusive partnership discussions, we would like to begin immediately." Evan scanned it quickly and said, "They're worried Sterling Horizon is losing the deal, so they're making their move." Danielle nodded. Next. The second email, Continental Vista Airlines, subject line, exclusive collaboration. The third, the National Black Business Alliance, subject line, full support. The fourth, a tech CEO she knew well. "Add me to your advisory team if you plan to take this fight all the way." Evan stared at her voice, low. "Do you realize? You've just started a movement." Danielle closed her laptop. "Movements begin with pain, but they only grow when someone refuses to stay quiet." And then her phone lit up with a notification, so shocking that Evan almost dropped his coffee. Robert Caldwell, chairman of the board, Sterling Horizon, incoming call. Evan stared at Danielle, breath caught in his throat. "Are you going to answer?" Danielle looked at the name on the screen. No anger, no fear. Only a cold steadiness, like the sea before a hurricane. "No," she said. Evan blinked. "No, not now." Danielle stood and walked toward the window, the city unfolding beneath her. "Let them bleed a little longer," she said. "Let them understand this is not a phone call to correct a mistake." She turned back to Evan, her gaze sharp as a blade. "This is a summons." Evan swallowed hard, and Danielle finished her voice, calm and lethal. "And when they call again, they won't be asking for my forgiveness." She turned off the notification, the screen going black. "They'll be asking me to save them." The next 24 hours would determine whether an airline lived or died. And Danielle knew, with every second that passed, the balance of power was tipping toward her. Night settled over San Francisco, like a heavy black velvet curtain. But inside Danielle Parker's suite, the glow from her laptop screen and the flood of phone notifications turned the room into a command center in the middle of an operation. There was no trace of luxury left in the air, only the pulse of someone who knew she now held the reins of an entire airline in her hands. Evan stepped in, carrying a stack of fresh reports. "They're panicking," he said bluntly. Sterling Horizon's stock dropped 7% after the story spread. Financial analysts are issuing brand risk warnings. And Danielle's phone vibrated. A message flashed across the screen. "Robert Caldwell, Miss Parker, we need to talk. Very urgent." Danielle stared at the message without moving. "Are you going to make him wait?" Evan asked. "He needs to understand." Danielle said slowly that I decide the timing. 7:45 the next morning. The news exploded. The Danielle Parker incident may trigger a leadership shakeup at Sterling Horizon. Major corporations reconsider using Sterling Horizon services. Stock continues to fall. Meanwhile, Sterling Horizon called an emergency board meeting, one none of them wanted, but none of them could avoid. At 10:03, Danielle's phone rang for the 11th time in 2 hours. This time she answered. "Miss Parker, this is Robert Caldwell," his voice rough with tension. "The board met this morning. The situation is extremely serious. I need you to join a virtual meeting with the full board of directors as soon as possible." Danielle stood and walked toward the glass window, morning light reflecting off her deep red power suit like a flame. "I'll join," she said. In 30 minutes. Caldwell exhaled in relief as if someone had thrown him a lifeline. "Thank you. We truly appreciate." Danielle hung up before he could finish. 30 minutes later, at 11 o'clock, the virtual meeting began. 14 video squares appeared on the screen. 12 board members, CEO Gregory Stanton, and the meeting secretary. Every face was stretched tight with dread. Miss Parker Caldwell began trying to sound composed. "Thank you for joining us." Danielle did not smile. She did not nod. She looked directly into the camera. "I want to know," she said, "whether the board acknowledges that what I experienced was not a misunderstanding, but a systemic issue." A beat of dead silence. Then Caldwell answered, heavy and resigned. "Yes, we acknowledge it." Several members behind him nodded reluctantly, but necessarily. Danielle tilted her head slightly, a signal that the meeting had started on the correct foot. "Then listen," she said. She opened the Parker Standards document and shared her screen. For the next 20 minutes, she outlined a full corporate overhaul diversity benchmarks at every level: mandatory anti-bias training, transparent complaint reporting, demographic-based service, evaluation, leadership, accountability, quarterly independent audits, and penalties for failing to meet standards. The virtual room stayed frozen. When she finished, Caldwell drew a long breath. "These proposals are enormous, very costly, and they would significantly affect our governance model." Danielle's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Not as costly as discrimination, and certainly not as costly as losing Nova Shield and the respect of the market." One director protested. "If we implement everything Sterling Horizon will have to restructure the entire company," Danielle raised an eyebrow. "That is the goal." Silence struck again, like a blow. Gregory Stanton, who had remained shocked and silent like a condemned man, finally spoke. His voice trembled, stripped of his previous authority. "Miss Parker, I apologize. We will discipline the employees involved. I will personally." Danielle lifted a single finger. He stopped instantly. "I'm not talking about a few employees," she said. "I'm talking about the way this company is led." The room felt like it had been slapped. Stanton swallowed hard. "Bajou, what do you want me to do?" Danielle looked directly at him, her eyes cold as forged steel. "I want you to step down." Gasps filled the room. "Oh my God, impossible." She's Caldwell raised his hand, silencing them. "And Stanton?" He lowered his head, his shoulders sinking like someone whose strength had drained away. "I know," Stanton whispered. "I know this is my failure. If the board requires my resignation, I'll do it." No one objected. No one dared. Caldwell turned back to Danielle through the screen. "If a new CEO commits to implementing the full Parker standards, will Nova Shield consider continuing the partnership?" Danielle spoke slowly, clearly. "The next CEO must be someone who understands the weight of this issue. Someone with not only competence, but moral responsibility." Caldwell hesitated. "Do you have someone in mind?" Danielle smiled. For the first time in the entire meeting. "I do." She pressed send. Every member's screen blinked with the same incoming email. "File Patricia Monroe. Immediate nomination for new CEO." The room went into shock. Patricia Monroe, former COO, a black woman with 28 years of experience in the industry, a leader widely regarded as more capable and innovative than Stanton, but previously excluded from consideration because she didn't fit the traditional leadership image. Caldwell looked at her resume, then looked at Danielle. "You want Patricia?" "No," Danielle replied. "I want a new Sterling Horizon." The board deliberated in a closed session for 20 minutes. When they returned, Caldwell announced, "We unanimously vote to appoint Patricia Monroe as the new CEO. Stanton will resign today." Danielle nodded. "Then we will proceed." Evan, sitting beside her, realized exactly what had just happened. Danielle Parker had replaced the CEO of an entire airline because of one flight. As the meeting wrapped, Caldwell added one final sentence before the screen went dark. "Miss Parker, thank you for forcing us to see what we should have seen long ago." Danielle answered, "I didn't force you. Your own system forced itself to change." When the call ended, she sank back into her chair. Not exhausted, but released. She had just completed the first step of something very few people dared to attempt, breaking a corrupted structure at its root. That morning, San Francisco seemed awakened by two things: the clear sunlight and the news shaking the entire nation. Across every major headline, Sterling Horizon Airlines replaces CEO amid discrimination crisis. Patricia Monroe becomes the first black woman CEO in the company's history. Nova Shield keeps the contract, but demands full corporate reform. Between those bold lines was a photo of Danielle Parker stepping out of the Meridian Grand, her ivory suit sharp against the light, her posture steady as stone, her expression calm yet commanding. Evan followed her arms full of thick documents, whispering, "Are you ready for the press conference?" Danielle replied without turning her head. "I'm not preparing to speak." She paused at the car door and offered a small, meaningful smile. "I'm preparing to witness change." 9:30 in the morning, Sterling Horizon Headquarters, San Francisco. The press hall. Hundreds of reporters, cameras, microphones, lights packed together like a tidal wave of brightness. Sterling Horizon had never seen anything like this, a company that had always been conservative, closed and unaccustomed to facing its failures in public. But today they had no choice. The PR staff stood stiff with anxiety. The board members clenched sleeves and straightened ties to hide their nerves, and in the front row sat Danielle with Evan and the Nova Shield team. The moment she entered, cameras swung toward her, clicking like a volley of fireworks. A reporter whispered, "That's her. The woman who forced an entire corporation to its knees. Not exaggeration, not media drama, just truth." 9:45. The press conference began. Caldwell stepped up to the podium first, his expression solemn yet respectful. Today he began Sterling Horizon Airlines, announces one of the most important decisions in our company's history. The room grew so quiet that even the click of a pen cap echoed. After an internal meeting, we have unanimously agreed to adopt the full set of reform principles known as the Parker Standards, a framework of transparency, equity, and accountability that Sterling Horizon should have embraced long ago. He glanced at the front row where Danielle sat, and for the first time in the company's history, the chairman of an airline bowed his head to a black woman, CEO, in front of the world. We also announce Caldwell continued the resignation of Mr. Gregory Stanton, effective immediately. A gasp rippled through the press. And today we are honored to introduce the new CEO of Sterling Horizon Airlines, Patricia Monroe. Patricia Monroe stepped onto the stage, tall silver hair, softly curled eyes, bright and sharp like forged metal. Unlike Stanton, her smile was not polished. It was real and steady and full of purpose. "Thank you to the board for your trust," Patricia said. "But trust must be earned, and I intend to earn it through action, not promises." She paused and turned her gaze toward Danielle, not in flattery, but in acknowledgement. "I want to say this clearly. The change happening today did not begin with Sterling Horizon. It began with a woman who stood against wrongdoing, even when it might have broken everything." Patricia turned fully toward Danielle and spoke for the world to hear. "Danielle Parker, thank you for forcing us to face ourselves." Applause erupted, breaking the silence like a wave. Not polite applause. Respect. Danielle rose when invited to speak and walked to the podium without hesitation. Her voice was not loud, but deep, clear, and carried straight to the heart. "I did not come here to win," she said. "I came because I once was a child standing at an airport window watching planes take off, wondering if someone like me would ever be worthy of sitting in one." A few reporters lowered their eyes, moved. "I come from Detroit, from a family without wealth, from a place where people often judge you by your skin color before your ability." She scanned the room. "And yesterday on a Sterling Horizon flight, I was treated as if I did not belong there." Her voice tightened, but did not shake. "But I do belong, and so does every other passenger." The room held its breath. "That is why the Parker standards exist," Danielle said. "Not to protect me, but to protect the people who do not have microphones, titles, or power. The people who cannot stand up and say, 'I deserve respect.'" She inhaled slowly. "Today, Sterling Horizon chose change, and I believe they will follow through because now they have a CEO ready to lead that change." Danielle turned to Patricia. "We will do this together." Immediately after the press conference, the domino effect began. Sterling Horizon's announcement spread like wildfire. 3 other airlines immediately requested to adopt the Parker standards. The National Civil Rights Association issued a special statement of support. Fortune 500 CEOs called Danielle for guidance on cultural reform initiatives. The hashtag Parker Standards became the #1 trend nationwide. Nova Shield's PR department exploded with requests and messages and interview invitations. Evan brought Danielle an iPad. "You have to see this. On the cover of the country's biggest business magazine, Danielle Parker, the woman who just changed American aviation." Danielle glanced at it and smiled softly. "I haven't changed aviation. I just opened the door." That afternoon at San Francisco International Airport, Danielle prepared to board a flight to New York with Patricia for the official signing ceremony. As they entered the terminal, an 11-year-old girl ran toward them. Brown skin, hair tied high, eyes bright like twin stars. Are you Miss Danielle?" Danielle stopped. "My mom said I was mistaken. But I know who you are. You're the one who made them change, right?" Danielle knelt to eye level. "What's your name?" "My name is Harper. I want to be a pilot. But people say it's hard for black girls." Patricia smiled warmly beside them. Danielle placed a hand on Harper's shoulder. "Harper, listen to me. They used to say the same thing about me. And you can see where I'm standing now." Harper's eyes widened. "If you want to be a pilot," Danielle said firmly, "CAO Monroe and I will make sure no one stands in your way." Harper threw her arms around Danielle so suddenly and so fiercely that Danielle nearly lost her balance. But she hugged back tightly. Because in that embrace she felt the true purpose of everything she had done. not for herself, but for the next generation. When Harper left, Patricia whispered all of this. Because of one flight. Danielle looked toward the runway where planes were lining up for takeoff. Not because of one flight, she said. Because of a limit I refused to let others place on me. They walked toward the boarding gate. The afternoon wind carried the scent of jet fuel and the metallic rhythm of steel against steel, the sound of movement of the sky. Danielle paused for a moment, looking at the clear horizon, golden sunlight brushing the aircraft wings. Then she said, just loud enough to hear. And in the end, I learned this loss makes us resist, but wounded dignity. That is what makes us change the world. Patricia nodded. And you did. Danielle smiled, small and deep, the kind of peace found only after a storm. We're just getting started. The aircraft door opened. 2 women, a black tech engineer and a black CEO, stepped into first class, not as passengers, but as architects rewriting the rules. And behind them, the aviation industry was already shifting one policy at a time, one person at a time, one future at a time. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and corporate responsibility, Danielle Parker's journey reminds us of a timeless truth that real power does not come from a title, but from how we choose to use it. She did not choose silence. She did not choose to negotiate for personal gain. She chose to confront a system that had grown comfortable avoiding accountability. That unwavering resolve forced a massive airline to change its structure, change its leadership, and change how it sees people. What makes her story a model lesson is not the hundreds of millions of dollars involved, but the way Danielle used economic power to create moral power. She proved that when a company places human dignity on the same level as profit, it becomes not only the right thing to do, but also a smart business strategy. If this story resonated with you, tap like to help spread the message that change always begins with someone who dares to stand up. And if you want to follow more journeys where justice is not only spoken, but carried out, make sure to subscribe because we have many more powerful stories ahead. Before you go, comment exactly 3 words as a reminder to yourself and to the world about the value of respect. Dignity first, or